I guess we'll get started. I know all this talk of Krispy Kreme has got me hungry and wanted me to eat lunch, so I'll try and get through this as quickly as possible. Somebody asked me when I first talked about doing this, why in the world would you want to share all this information with everyone? It's kind of a private thing, right? I mean, you go through an experience, there's a whole bunch of emotions, and I think the short answer is giving back. When I first went through this and started talking with friends, it became quite obvious that a number of people had been touched and went to the doctor themselves to get tested for a physical, to get a cardiac stress test, and some other serious, even more serious things that I'll relate later. So that was the first thing. The second thing was, I really owe my life to two people. One of them I work with was a colleague who went in for a hernia operation, and as part of that testing, they discovered he needed quadruple bypass. He's in this room right now. I won't embarrass him by asking him to stand up. And then a second person that I rode with, who one day couldn't make it to the top of a hill. In this particular case, it turned out to be an electrical issue. So when it came time for a physical, my birthday, this was in my mind. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So those were the two things, basically giving back. If one person can learn from this experience, I think the bearing of soul is worth it. So let's start the story. All good stories have a beginning and a little bit of background. So my story started in Menominee Falls, where I grew up, the oldest of four, with three little sisters. When I wasn't fighting them, I had my canteen on and I was ready to go about and save the world. I had a momentary career in film. And I also enjoyed spending a lot of time in my treehouse. Like everyone my age, I went through the mustache years and the bearded years, and before finally coming to Marquette in the early 1980s to do my undergrad. At that time, campus looked a little bit different, and you can see, we had the new Alumni Memorial Union. It's an interesting map. Thank you, Michael Novak. And this time, this is what technology looked like. This was the top-end computer of the day. You connected it to your television and to a tape recorder. That's where you stored your programs. It had a whopping 2K of memory, expandable all the way to 64. Right? And a thermal printer was extra. I still have this computer, but now it has a little bit different. So after I finished with Marquette, I spent a few wayward years at the University of Miami down in Florida before finally coming back to Marquette in 2003. Some of you may know me from some of the projects we worked together on. Some of you may have known me from maybe a class that I have taught or that I have asked you to contribute to. Probably none of you know about this book that I worked on with a bunch of other people because no one's bought it yet. Or on the Academic Senate. But likely, you all know me from some of the cycling escapades that I've done. Crazy things. There's two teams I ride with. One is with Marquette, and the other is the TOSA spokesman, of which several are here. Thank you very much, guys, for showing up and supporting. I've done some crazy things cycling-wise, like biking across Iowa in a race called RAGBRAI. Not once, but twice. And, of course, we're also one of those sorts of groups of riders that all weather is good weather. So even in the middle of a rainstorm, we will keep riding to Holy Hill. This was last year, right about this time. And, of course, since all weather is good weather, the temperature can be 5 or 10 degrees, and we'll still go riding. Perhaps my most glorious moment came during the commencement of our president, Mike Lovell. He was on the front page of the Milwaukee Journal, and so was I. My first time on the front page of the newspaper, and I'm photobombing our new president. Okay, but so enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about how this whole story started. My birthday is May 6th, and every year, traditionally, that's when I'll go in for the annual physical. And this year was a little bit different because, as I mentioned, I had those two folks that I knew who had some trouble with their heart. And so I decided to request some blood work and also a cardiac stress test. So the blood work came back, and it's absolutely amazing. Look at this. Cholesterol, 170. HDL, 46. It's beautiful numbers. Anyone would love those. So next came the cardiac stress test. Has anyone had one of those before? I know several of you. Yeah. So it's not really a big deal, right? They inject some dye into you, and then they take pictures, and then they inject more dye, and they run you up on this treadmill and take pictures again. So I saw the doctor on a Tuesday. We scheduled the cardiac stress test on a Friday of that week. Now, those of you that have had the cardiac stress test, what's the worst part of the prep? No caffeine. For 24 hours. This is my coffee machine at home. I like coffee. So it's 10 a.m. Friday morning. I'm perhaps a little bit agitated and going through withdrawals. And I get to the clinic and they tell me, we never got approval from your insurance company. We can't do this today. No, you don't understand. I haven't had coffee in like 24 hours. It's a Friday. Well, we haven't gotten pre-auth. Oh, that's okay. I'll pay for it. But we don't have any isotopes. I'll help you find some. So a little bit of persistence, some hush talking and back, and lo and behold, can you come back at 2:30? So I'm out in Menominee Falls, nothing to do. I still can't have caffeine for 4 hours. What do? I snuck over to my mom's house. Why are you here? Oh, just in the neighborhood. Didn't want any unnecessary worrying. And I went there, and here were the results. So there's two parts of the test. One is an EKG under stress, and the other one is the radiography. So that's just kind of a bunch of gibberish. Here's the important part. Evaluation of the ST segments revealed that with exercise, the patient does develop ST segment depressions consistent with ischemia, which means blockage to your heart. So if you know or are familiar with an EKG, that's the P wave. That big thing is the QRS complex, and that's the T wave. So what I had was this downsloping right here. I'm driving home, right? And the doctor's telling me all this on the phone. I'm like, Kurt, with a K, right? I don't want to believe it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Let's see what the radiography said. Same sort of thing. 3 segments of ischemia. No fixed perfusion, which is good. And an ejection fraction, which has to do with how much your heart can push through with each beat, was pretty low. So normal would be 75. 55 is about as low as you want to go. So I'm sitting in traffic, brewer traffic, getting all of this at about 6 o'clock in the morning, or 6 o'clock at night. It seems like it was 6 o'clock in the morning. That's what the thing looks like. And I'm just, flabbergasted. I don't know what the heck is going on. No, you don't understand. I biked 3,500 miles so far this year. I just rode this morning. This can't be. This can't be. And that was really a lonely drive home. Very slow, very long. And I started to think for a minute. For the past couple of years, twice a year, I've done a ride out to Holy Hill so we do with Mike Lovell and some of the students, and there's probably 60 or 70 people that go. And as part of that work, I had been doing, just a few days before, some reconnoitering. So going and riding the route, riding up and down the area, just to make sure everything was fine. And how many have been to Holy Hill before? So almost everyone. It gets its name from Holy Hill. I mean, you know when you are there. And all winter, all I had thought about was riding up those hills. God, I'm just going to conquer those hills. I had trained so hard and was going to go up those hills like crazy. And we got to the first hill, and my chain came off. I also fell over, but my chain came off. So I put it back on the bike and started pedaling again. And guess what happened? My chain came off again. 15 feet further. Try to get up the hill. My chain went off again. It's the weirdest thing ever because I had ridden so many miles on that bike, and embarrassingly, I ended up having to walk it up, which no cyclist ever wants to do. Like hiding, making sure no one is seeing what's going on. And it struck me when I pulled into my garage that Friday. That's kind of the first lesson in this thing, is that all things given unto us are presents from God. I still get shivers down my spine thinking, what if that chain had stayed on? My heart rate would have skyrocketed through the roof, and maybe I would have had a heart attack right there. The odds are pretty likely, based on some of the things you'll see. So this is from St. Ignatius, and it's really, I try to look at things now with this particular lens. You know, a lot of times, bad situations, we just don't see what they might hold in the future. So I get home, and I may have had a beer that night, and now it's time to go and see a cardiologist. And so I get a call, you get scheduled with some sort of generic cardiologist. I went and saw him, and yeah, I was less than impressed. He certainly was knowledgeable, but I seemed to be kind of like a gnat to him, kind of troublesome. And when his physician's assistant came at the end of the appointment, I said, you know, what do you think of Dr. So-and-so? I mean, he seems like a nice guy, but, you know, I've never met him before, and would you send your family to him? And she said, well, you know, I get asked that a lot. Oh boy. And I'm never really sure how I should answer. But I guess after all these years, and I've already checked out, yeah, I probably would. Like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad. So I called my sister, Chris, who's here, and she works at one of the hospitals, and I said, you know, hey, can you check this guy out? See what people think about him. And I think the answer was no one could find anything good to say. It's probably most accurate. So I happen to have a number of physician friends, so I started asking them, who's the best cardiologist in town? What's the top guy? I looked at research, and two names kept coming up. One was a guy named Bajwa, and the other guy was someone named DeFranco. I'm like, DeFranco. I remember my sister's room. Tiger Beach. The DeFranco family. Oh, he's perfect. And look at, there's their hit single, Heartbeat. It's a love beat. It's meant to be. So I called him up, actually, spoke to his receptionist, and she said, his schedule is really tight because he's going out of town, but could you get here in 40 minutes? It was like noon, 12:30. I'm like, yeah, okay. You know, so I just left. And I got there to his office about 1:30. And I have to say, I really like the guy. You know, working in a university, doing research, he's like total research bound. And if we have time, I'll share some of his pearls of wisdom. But he really lets research drive his advice and his cure. So that's him, Dr. D, Dr. DeFranco. I told him my story, sort of how I had done all this cycling and all of these things. And then I said, but you know, on the other hand, we have this test that isn't probably good. He said, there's one more thing we can do. It's called a calcium CT score. He said, it'll kind of add to our picture, but usually insurance doesn't pay for it. I'm like, okay. He said, but it's only about $100, $125. I'm like, okay, that works for me. But I think our technician is about to leave. But if I tell her that she's a Marquette grad, and if I tell her you work there too, I think she might stay a little bit. I'm telling you, this is true. So she did. I mean, it takes like, you know, you're in there for 2 minutes. It whirs around and it computes a score. And so here are some of the scores. 0, 1, some of these vary a little bit by age, but in general, lower, well, not in general, lower is definitely better. So I'm sitting there fidgeting in the office all alone and waiting, and he finally comes in and he's like, well, congratulations. You have the top score.
Oh.
I felt, you know, I sort of made this up, but it's kind of like I was playing a centipede game. I had scored more than double what the normal expectation was. And he said, so now the scale's kind of tilting in the other direction. And we should probably do an angiogram or cardiac catheterization. Is everyone familiar with that? So, you know, now I thought this was just a simple office visit. right? And already it's like 3 o'clock, 3:30 now. And so he wants to do an angiogram. I'm like, well, he's like, look, the hardest part about this is waiting. So I am going to London tomorrow morning, but the good news is my wife said she'll hold dinner, so how about we meet in an hour? Again, what? I just came in for an appointment at 5:30. I'm going to be going in for an angiogram, and you're going to be cutting into my artery and putting things in there. And so I thought about it for 10 minutes, and ultimately I think decided that the fear of waiting was outweighed by the fear of, or the other way, doing it right now. And so, you know, what they do is they make a small little cut in your leg. They stick this long tube up and inject you with all kinds of dye. And really I have to say it was nothing big. You don't even feel it. And, you know, that he was, you know, bless their heart, this group. I was a little bit shaky walking down there, and one of the nurses walked me into the cardiac cath lab, and one of the physician's assistant, many of them who were from Marquette, made sure I had some good drugs to help me relax. And I called my mom. You know, they said, bring your phone in because you'll want to take pictures. And okay, so I did. And this is kind of what it's like. And these are the actual pictures from my angiogram. That's sort of the setup, and then here are some closer ones. So dark is good. That means there's dye going through. This is not good. That's about a 90% blockage. You can see some other stuff here too. This is the segment they call the Widowmaker. One of the things you'll notice that he pointed out is when you have all this obstruction, so all 4 coronary arteries of mine were 80% blocked and one had a 95% segment. But what your body will do is create extra stuff. Some other bad news. And there you can see pretty clearly. Here. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe they'll put in a stent, maybe 2. And he says, well, if we were going to do stents, we would do 8 or more. And so I asked him to explain a little bit more. So, you know, if this is a normal artery, what happens is you have this calcium or plaque that builds up. And so that's the restricted areas that you see in that angiogram. And here's the collateral circulation that gets built up. What can happen in a heart attack then is some of this plaque can break off of the wall and completely block the vessel. So your heart ends up getting no blood flow. Oh boy. So it's a lot to take in as you're sitting there, and the procedure takes about 15 minutes, and then about another 30 minutes with a man standing on top of you compressing your artery so it doesn't bleed. Those of you who have had this experience are nodding their heads. So, you know, I'm not going to have a stent. He's like, you need bypass surgery, and it's probably going to be quintuple. And so I'm on my phone trying to find out, well, what is quintuple bypass surgery? And I can't even find it because it only goes up to 4. Deep breaths, deep breaths, deep breaths. And, you know, now it's 7 o'clock, and they're telling me I should stay overnight because they have all these tests they want to do. And, you know, it's my 1 o'clock appointment that's turned into an all-night thing and 5 bypasses. And I don't know how I called my boss. I think I just said, I might not be coming in for a day or more. Certain parts of this are all cloudy. Eventually, though, you know, the loneliest part is sitting in that hospital after everyone had gone home. And you're alone with your thoughts, and you're also thinking that there's a fabulous ice cream store called Leon's across the street. But you're thinking there's 2 ways you can react to this, either with fear or with bravery. And I stumbled upon this, which I've had for years and years and years. And I just sort of made up my mind that that's the way I wanted to confront this. So the next challenge was, now I need a cardiothoracic surgeon. Who am I going to do? I don't want just anyone. So luckily, I had several friends in the industry, so to speak, and I was able to get this guy to do it. His name is Eric Weiss, excellent, one of the best in the country, arguably, and he moved here in February. He agreed to do the surgery. He mainly does sort of heart transplants and things like that, so I hope this was pretty boring for him. And I had my fingers crossed that things would go well. The other thing when you are confronted with this is you start to think of things that probably never had to think of before, like, how about a will? Advance directives, DNRs. You have a whole list of bank and investment accounts and passwords for various things. How does anyone find those? You have to sort of prepare for the worst. And so it was a fairly busy time, which I think was good because it sort of keeps your mind off of thinking too much about what may be coming down the road. The other thing I decided that to do is, you know, if anything did happen, I didn't want a big party at my funeral. I wanted a party now. So I threw myself a Cinco de bypass party. And, you know, I figured it would be a few close friends, and there was probably over 100 people that showed up. It was all very nice. And the other thing I did against the doctor's orders was go for one last bike ride. And I did that the night before I went in. And those are the actual picture. Because I wanted to remember that. Mostly because I wouldn't be able to do it for a long time. So the night of surgery comes. It's Thursday night, May 21st. And it's time to scrub. And scrub you shall. You shall scrub your body with that little sponge before you go to bed. And you shall scrub your body with that little sponge again at 4 in the morning because you have to be there at 5. I slept pretty well that night. Didn't really have too many problems. And I did manage to make it to surgery at about 5 a.m. This is me in the surgical waiting room right before I got wheeled in. And I pretty much remember them saying, "Hi, this is Dr. So-and-so. I'm your anesthesiologist." And that's about it. Thankfully so. I've had some other knee surgeries where you're sitting in that room and talking, and you're like, just get done with it already. And so then they start to work, right? They not only do work on your chest, but they also rip out the entire vein in one of your legs. Dr. Weisrichter. The other thing is that they completely stop your heart and put you on bypass, which is this huge machine down here. Your sternum is sawed completely in half. You're cracked open like a fillet, and your heart and lungs are all out. And I don't know, I think I was in there for 3, 4, 5 hours, 6 hours, something like that. And then you finally come out into a special surgical waiting room. I don't know how long I had been out. So this is a central line, goes directly into your artery in case they need to give you drugs quickly. This is kind of interesting. It is 12 pacemaking leads that there are wires inside your body laying right on your heart in case something would happen and they would need to shock it or pace it. Lots of good drugs. Insulin, fentanyl. Better living through chemistry. There you can kind of see a little bit what that incision looks like. Now, these bad boys right here, the thing that's covered up, we'll talk about those later. Those are called chest tubes. Anyone familiar with chest tubes? Another word for chest tube is garden hose. And there's 4 of them inside of you. The surgical ICU room was pretty cool, I have to say, because you basically have your cardiac ICU was pretty cool because you basically have your own nurse that sits in there the entire time, and all she does is watch your stuff, watch your monitor, watch everything else. The funny sidebar to that story is she had just moved here, was a cyclist, so we kind of kept in touch afterwards, and then I saw a picture of her in Hawaii a month ago with the surgeon. So apparently they have been dating. I'm like, thank God I only said good things about her. So there I am shortly after the surgery, holding up my cup warmer with that says rule number 5. So there's a list of cycling rules. There's 128 of them. And rule number 5 is abbreviated HTFU, harden the heck up. And so that was kind of what I was trying to let everyone know, is that I wasn't going to let this stop me. This is also a good point to bring up the second lesson that I learned from this whole experience. Password protect your iPhone when you're giving it to your sister. Right back there. So that was Friday. Saturday was not really a good day. Could not get the pain management right at all, mainly from those 4 garden hoses that were sticking inside of me. And also, we had kind of a persnickety sort of physician's assistant. There was a drug that had worked once, but they only wanted to give it every 24 hours. Thankfully, one of my physician friends was in on a Saturday, and she texted Eric, my surgeon, and said, look, blah, 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 blah. So he came down. He drove down. He was downtown. And these were the culprits. So I don't know if you can really see, but there are 2 of these on either side, and those tubes are the things that are inside of you, the chest tubes. So it really is like a garden hose, and there's about a foot at least inside you. So anytime you move, sit up, go to the bathroom, it's a new experience in pain. And I would sit there for 30 minutes. It was so painful. So Eric came down and said, look, give him what he wants. The magic drug was called Torval. It's a pretty powerful NSAID. So in the end, I was on Torval, morphine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and one other thing I'm not sure I can remember. No surprise. But I do know I was very happy. So that was the key. So as the days went on, I eventually got the chest tubes pulled out. That came the following Tuesday. And really then there was no stopping me. I had put up some team jerseys in the room, so I would always focus on what my ultimate goal, that I didn't intend on staying there long, that I wanted to get back to an active life. And so a couple things happened. It looked like I was going to go home on a Thursday, and Wednesday morning I realized, oh, it's my sister's birthday and she's coming to visit. Well, I should probably get her a gift. So, but it didn't occur to me that walking down 9 flights of stairs to the gift shop would be a bad idea. And I did, of course, and that wasn't that big of a deal. But then when I started to go up the stairs, and I got to about the second one and thought, maybe I should take the elevator. And then my last night, I had such a wonderful nursing crew. Someone mentioned they liked ice cream, and you know what that meant. Yep, I walked over to Leon's. Walked over to Leon's and bought the whole staff ice cream. And so I'm sitting there with my, thing in here, and I come back, and everyone's upset because apparently you go off telemetry, right? So they're recording all of your, Mr. Gering, you went off telemetry. What is going on here? Oh, I don't know. Ice cream? And so I hung around and got out on Friday. A couple people came to see me. Mike Lovell came and spent 30 minutes with me. My good friend Marty picked me up, took me home, and my good friend Sarah. So the first thing I did when I got home, can you guess?
Coffee.
Coffee. I actually hopped on a bike. Rode the little bike trainer for 5 miles, and then I called my friend Sarah and said, let's go to the beer garden.
Like what?
And so we sat there, and I think I had half a beer and talked with Hans. Weisgerber was there, and he's like, let me buy you another one. I said, I don't think that mixes with oxycodone very well. So I'm probably just going to go home. But it was sort of, I wanted to, it was enough was enough. I wanted to get about living life again. And so, I had it in my mind that I wanted to get back on my bike as soon as I could. Now, unfortunately, when they saw your sternum in half, it takes about 8 weeks to heal. And it's really not a good idea to go biking, because if you fall, it can break open, and like an egg, you'll spill out. So while my bike was not being used, I found other things to use it for. Works remarkably well to hang up laundry. And I also would spend some time over at the College of Engineering in their virtual lab, doing some of the virtual spin classes. If you've never had a chance to do them, it's absolutely amazing. So it's like spin class in an IMAX theater. It's really an amazing experience. I got to say, there were challenges to trying to ride. This was the leg that they had ripped the artery out of, and it's still fairly swollen. But I set a goal that for the month of June, I wanted to ride indoors 500 miles. And I did 555. 31 hours, so I was doing about an hour a day of rehab, at least. And that's kind of the third thing I learned. You know, going to a beer garden, walking over to Leon's, walking up steps, riding 500 miles, it's all crazy stuff, and who would ever think of doing it? But why not? You know, the ultimate guiding thing that the cardiologist and the surgeon both said was, you'll know when you push yourself too far. And that's what I did. I believe his exact words were, don't go crazy. Well, as we all know, one person's crazy is another person's normalcy. So I kept going, spinning, riding with my friends. It's July 6th. I'm champing at the bit because I can almost ride outside now, another 4 weeks. Life is going to be good, so I have the follow-up appointment, and we do the wonderful lipid panel, and my numbers are even better than they were. Cholesterol 120, LDL 68. That wasn't so good, but amazing numbers. Thank you, Lipitor. And so I go in to see him for the follow-up appointment, and he's like, your numbers look good, I'll see you in a year. I'm like, wait a minute, buddy. Not so fast there, I've got some questions. And so I proceeded to rail off a whole bunch of questions, which is very nice and spent time with me. And I said, and lastly, I'm wondering, maybe could we do another cardiac stress test? I kind of want to see how things turned out. I do a lot of riding and have some events coming up. Let's see what's happened. And he said, normally I would suggest waiting 6 months, but okay. And so I did, and they couldn't do it. I had what was called pericardial effusion. So this is my heart here. This is the wall, the outer wall, and there's fluid built up. And when there's fluid, it reduces the efficiency of pumping of the heart. This was a pretty big setback. Didn't necessarily know if it was a sign of something bad or if it was just normal post-operative. So we decided to wait. And I got to take this great drug called colchicine, which for years has been a gout medication, but they discovered quite by accident about 3 years ago that's also remarkable for pericarditis. It removes the fluid. Fortunately, it also has some very bad side effects. I probably gained 15 or 20 pounds. I was either throwing up or other worse things every morning. And it also tends to kill off your muscles. And so, if anyone has been on it, you're walking like this. And this happens because it interacts with the statins. The good news is that I've been off this for a week, and the effusion is down considerably. I go back on the 15th for another one, and hopefully it'll all be gone. That kind of led to the fourth one, sort of fourth truth. Hills are put there to remind us how important something is. And I got a big reminder. but it really made me appreciate some of the simple things, like riding, like health. And think about it for a minute, right? You don't want to be in the flats. You kind of want to be in the hills, right? You've got, no one likes flat soda. No one likes a singer that's flat. No one likes a flat line. That's like the ultimate bad thing. Hills are where it's at. When my group is riding, I'll often shout out, hills are our friend and make us stronger riders, which is usually meant by curse words. So I keep going. I'm counting it down. How many more days till I can go and ride? 15, 14, 13. And I think I got to about 4 days short of 8 months, and I just sort of said, that's enough. I went out for my first ride. Curiously enough, I found that giraffe. No Milwaukee lion, but I did find the giraffe. So, kept riding, hang out with friends. August 30th comes around. It's coming around. It's going to be, it was about a week away, and I'm like, wow, that will be 100 days. 100 days since my surgery. 100 days. What could I do to commemorate that day? As a cyclist, what could I do? Of course, I have to go bike 100 miles. The answer is simple. So I talked to a few folks, and they agreed to join me. We just met at Estabrook Park, and we're going to take the interurban trail up to Kohler Andre Park. It's 50.5 miles, turn around. And I put a shout out there to see if anybody else wanted to come along from the group I ride with. And it was kind of foggy that morning, so I decided to drive there instead of biking about 5 miles away. And I'm driving into the parking lot, and wow, there's a lot of people in that parking lot. There must be some event going on. And they all have bikes. Well, so the group that I ride with, most of them had shown up to either ride partway or to ride along with me. And that was extremely emotional. We rode all the way up, and here I am at Terry Andre Park, 101.7 miles, 6 hours, 16 mile an hour average speed. And that kind of led me to sort of the last lesson, which I recall hearing from Stephen Colbert. I cherish most that which I wish had never happened to me. The ways that I have been touched with the outpouring of sympathy and with support have been amazing. The impact that I've been able to influence others in their health care. I alluded to it earlier. There was a person I went to high school who they discovered a hole in his heart. And the main reason he went was because he had been keeping up with what I was doing. You guys don't know this, but Thursday when we rode for the movie night, what's his name? Dave Patterson, the dentist? He's going in, there's a guy, Andy, there's a guy who's going in for surgery in a week to have his aorta fixed. He's said, I've been putting it off for months and months and months. I read about what you went through and thought, if he can do this in a day or a week, make this decision, why is it taking me so long? So he's going to Cleveland Clinic. So the future, you know, it's going on, whatever it is, 4 or 5 months now. And the biggest challenge is that there's a 60 to 80% chance of recurrence after 10 years because of the same things that messed your arteries up before are still there. So do whatever you can to mitigate those risks. Exercise, extremely low fat. There's some research that suggests if you can keep your LDL beneath 60, you can cut that in half. So that's kind of what I strive for. The interesting thing, though, is one of the things my cardiologist pointed out is 2 people can eat the same different diet, and they'll both react in different ways. Some can eat a Big Mac and McDonald's every day and be perfectly fine, and others, you know, would have coronary artery disease. Another thing he told me that was interesting is your liver will produce more cholesterol every day than you can ever eat. So I think the ultimate was that there are only some things you can control. And so if you try and do the best you can and just deal with the cards life has dealt you, I think you can move forward. So what's the point? Tried to find people who had bypass surgery. These are the ones. Unfortunately, I found many more who had passed away. And probably one of the most poignant examples for me was Jim Fix. You know this guy, he wrote the book of running. He really is largely responsible for the running craze and the jogging in the 80s and 90s. He was 52 and died of a heart attack after a run. He had 80% blockage in all of his coronary arteries. I'll just make this the last slide because I know we're running out of time, but this is the prevalence of cardiovascular disease, 40% for men. Now that's defining it as heart disease, failure, stroke, and or hypertension. Take the hypertension out, still fairly significant numbers. So the point of this is to get tested. It's very simple. I know there's a lot of people that put it off. But take a proactive approach and get tested. Thank you all very much for your time. You've been a very gracious audience. And I hope you learned a little bit something and maybe laughed along the way. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those now.
So thank you, first of all, for this. It's really good. The one thing that I'm perplexed about is your decision to go for a bike ride the night before. Because that makes no sense. I mean, someone who clearly sees the long term, you were advised not to do it, you clearly knew the risks for it. I would have been inclined to do the same, but I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
So what? Could you help me understand the process that went into that decision?
He never listened.
But why? I mean, why would you not? Why?
Well, I will say when I did go for that ride, it wasn't my most speedy effort. But I think it was, in one sense, rebellion. In another sense, it was a calming way to sort of gather my thoughts for what was about to come. So I've always, ever since I met Father Mike, he told me about the daily examen, Jesuit daily examen. I always found cycling or running or whatever just a time for quiet reflection and to go through. Because really one of the few times during the day you can be alone with your thoughts. And I think as much as it was rebellion and as much as it was just getting out, it was also, that was the way I was processing the stress that was sort of coming. Probably not a good answer, but
No, that's a great answer. Because I was a runner, I understood that perfectly.
yeah, you're a streak runner. I mean, you know, I cherish that time to be alone.
Yeah,
Now, I also will add that I had a priest and a doctor along with me. So I had all my bases covered. Just in case the worst happened.
So how did you advocate for yourself up against, like, or maybe you didn't have to, the insurance companies? Because I would think if I went in there and said I need all these tests, they'd be saying you really don't need them if it looks like you don't need them.
I have to say that the only thing that ever came up was we never got pre-auth. Once I just pushed back a little, everything else went very easy. I mean, it's a tribute to those in the insurance industry, at least here, it was very great. And I don't know, Sean, did you have any?
No, not really, no.
Never had, no, you can't do that, no, even some of the extra things that I've done, I mean, I had 3 echocardiograms afterwards. They've never been a problem.
Don't believe plywood counts.
Right.
Sawdust.
It's hard to find
Sawdust
wood.
is where we have.
John?
Yeah, what I find interesting and not necessarily surprising, but in listening to you talk even before today, I felt like you had to push the envelope at your initial physical with respect to the tests that they were doing. I mean, it was your idea, if I'm not mistaken, to do the one, you said a stress test with dye? Or what?
Yeah, with contrast.
For contrast. And that was your idea, it wasn't theirs.
Yeah, because the initial EKG, the AKG didn't show anything. It's only under stress that anything showed up.
Would they have perhaps moved this along without the contrast?
They wouldn't have even done the stress EKG if I wouldn't have asked for it.
So you had to push for that.
I just asked.
But I meant, it was your
I've
idea.
always-
It's interesting that it's not standard. I guess, is the point. That's not a standard test.
No, because it costs crap loads of money.
Okay. And then on the backside afterwards, that had you not pushed it, you wouldn't have seen the fluid around the heart.
I mean, and that's exactly true. And Dr. Bob. So there's a guy we ride with who's a physician,
Right.
and he is pretty still much in favor of the other approach. He, when you push for things like that and those tests to be done, there's also a danger of false positives and unnecessary sort of care. But I've always sort of felt better safe than sorry, and if I had the opportunity to, take the advice of my friends and what I know and take charge, sort of, that's what I wanted to do. So, yeah, I think, that is certainly a big takeaway, is take charge of your health care. Marty?
That's my takeaway also, is we, as consumers, as humans, have a vested interest in that process and take charge and ask those questions. You talk about the cost associated, and well done, Kurt. Really appreciate being here and appreciate you sharing your story today. Thank you. Regarding the EKG being a very expensive process, but that calcium test only being like $125, is that an option? Or would that be in lieu of that to be a first-line indicator?
Yeah, it's another piece of the puzzle, and several friends have asked for it, and it's all turned out very well. But that's just another piece, and it's very inexpensive, and there's a move on to get it covered a little bit more, and it's fairly accurate.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, I think I want to follow up on your question, which is, since that seems to be an indicator and it's inexpensive, why don't they do that kind of first as a, and if the numbers are off there, then you go to the more expensive testing. It would seem like that would be something that they would want to put out in front just because it's an inexpensive way of giving a first indicator.
Right, and in every case, these friends of mine have had to ask for it from their physician. So I agree. I don't know why it's not done. Maybe because they think people can't pay the $125. I don't know. But certainly to me, right, it would be that, then a cardiac stress, and then if those two line up, then the $25,000 or $30,000 angiogram. So go get one.
Is this videotape going to be available? I'm sure a lot of other people would really benefit from seeing it.
Yeah, I think John will.
If only we had a streaming video server.
Wow.
Is that a Marquette joke?
It's his project.
Slacking off for 2 months over the summer.
No.
We'll figure something out.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? Questions? Comments? Well, gosh, it was.
I just want to say thank you. It was very informative, very well done, and I appreciate you being upfront about it and your humor. Thank you very much.
Here, here.
Thank you all for coming and for skipping your lunch.
No,
Sounds like we're not supposed to be eating today.